Hello, everyone. Hi. Hi. I'm Jean Ruddy. I'm the co-founder, executive, and artistic director of the Performance Garage, along with my husband, who is the other co-director. He's with us tonight, and I'm so happy that he could join us. And I'm so happy all of you could join us. I wanted to welcome you. I know some people here have come to the Performance Garage for the first time. And when I feel that energy, I always say, that you're sitting in a 1865 old horse stable that was called Central Stables back in the day. And it then became an auto body garage that only would use Israeli mechanics at the time. And that's when we came along and in 2000 purchased this building, the very first building. And then we got the building adjacent, which has a second studio, dance studio in it. And finally, we were able to get this little piece, which you don't see, it's the dressing room. And so that's how the Performance Garage was born over these last 25 years, almost 25 years now. I want to thank my staff who's here tonight. Molly Doherty, she just walked in. And Cedric. Is Cedric in the audience? I can't see because the lights are in my eyes. Cedric. And in the booth, we have Liam Schaefer. He's our production manager. And behind the camera here is Les Rivera. He's always with us doing our videos. And we have a board member here, Millie Laneberg. Thank you, Millie, for all your work. And we also have a new board member here, Allison Laserwitz. Thank you so much for coming. Did I miss anybody? I hope not. Okay, I would like to introduce, this is a HubChat. We have a HubChat once or twice a year. It's a forum where we like to tossle up some ideas from our resident artist. We select one artist through a panel every year. And this year, it is the divine Megan Mazarick. And so HubChats are designed to have a little bit of chatting, a little bit of talking, as well as dancing, so that you, the audience, and the artist can deepen your relationship, and that you will get a little further into their thinking, and that maybe someday you will come back and see some of the performances and the new work that she's going to be developing as she's here for this 1 year of residency. So Megan, the reason we're getting to see Megan these days is she is a beautiful choreographer and performer known for blending movement, theater, and text, which you'll see tonight. Her choreographic style is marked by a bold exploration of identity and the human experience, which you'll see, often weaving personal narratives into powerful, emotive performances. Her work's been presented throughout the United States, Singapore, Bulgaria, Hungary, Egypt, Poland, Mexico, and Australia. So she has been around. Megan's solo Old Swan won the Audience Award at the 22 Gdansk Solo Dance Festival. And as an organizer, she developed a free dance program for the new festival and co-produced the By Chance Festival in Cairo, if you can imagine, in 2015. She teaches technique, improvisation, and composition all around the world. Megan is currently an assistant professor of dance at Rider University and a recipient of the very competitive, I must say, 2024 MAP Fund. It's like winning, I don't know, a Nobel Prize when you're a contemporary dancer. Let's all welcome Megan Mazarick. Megan's going to be performing. So I would also like to introduce, I think you all know, we have Dr. Jason Karlawish with us tonight. This part of the program is the lecture and speaking part. Jason is a physician and a writer, and I'm happy to say a neighbor of ours who lives down the street from Victor and I and Millie. He researches and writes about issues at the intersections of bioethics, aging, and the neurosciences. He's an author and novelist. His essays have been published in the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, Forbes, The Hill, the Los Angeles Times, the Philadelphia Inquirer, it's a long list, Sat News, and the Washington Post. Wow. He is a professor of medicine, medical ethics, and health policy, and neurology at the University of Pennsylvania, and the co-director of the most amazing Penn Memory Center, which is phenomenal. And there he cares for his patients. He's recently written a book that was seminal and very important about the subject that we're going to be talking about, Alzheimer's, tonight. And I'm going to let him say the name because I didn't write it down. I know it's The Problem of Alzheimer's, and then it has culture, science, and something else, and what we're going to do about it. It's really, I thought we were going to have a book signing, but he didn't bring his books, so I'm sorry, everybody. And I want to say one more thing before we bring Jason out, because I won't be back out here. Megan is going to have a master class on January 10th, which you're all able to come and observe if you'd like to come back to the Performance Garage in the winter. She'll also have an open rehearsal so that you can come back and watch her process as she's creating a new work. At our gala in the spring on Saturday, April 5th, she'll be showing an excerpt of that work so that you get to see, again, a little bit of the process. And then finally, the culmination of her year of work will be shown in a full concert season for 3 nights. You get 3 opportunities on May 8th, 9th, and 10th. So we have a lot to look forward to with Megan. I have one more thing I wanted to say. I'm so sorry, but look down at your elbows and you'll see some plaques down there, right? And some people have been so kind to dedicate that chair to honor either somebody that they care about or just, put their own name on the chair. And there are a few chairs left. Imagine that. And it only costs $1,000 to put your name on the chair, and we could really use the support. So if you'd like to consider doing something with the chair while you're here tonight, just get to any of us and let us know. Okay, with that, Jason, please come on.
Thank you, Jean. And there are some seats in the center area if people want to move center to be able to view the dance in its full-on perspective. It's a pleasure to be here. I think the statement a doctor and a dancer get up on stage could be a setup for a joke, but this isn't a joke. This is actually quite meaningful because we care deeply about the question, what is it like to be? Because that's a question that asks fundamentally, what is it like to have a mind? And I, as a physician at the Penn Memory Center, care deeply about the mind because, of course, a person living with dementia is living with a disease that is damaging their mind. It's making them a little less able to experience the world, a little less able to act with agency in the world. So I care deeply, my colleagues and I care deeply about the mind. So why is a doctor and a dancer on stage? Well, because I think one of the ways that we can answer that important question, what is it like to be a person living with dementia, is through the arts. And tonight is especially exciting because we're going to have the opportunity, and we're going to break the fourth wall, namely you all too, to ask and discuss that question, both by an individual who is going to do art, she's going to dance and make art, and you're going to witness it as well. And so she'll be able to talk about and answer this question of what is it like to be, and you all as well. And in this case, it's what is it like to be a person living with a very a common cause of dementia, not Alzheimer's, but a different disease called Lewy body disease. So what is it like to be a person living with Lewy body disease? Hold that question, keep it in your mind, and then we'll talk about it. So, shall we?
Did you want me to say anything?
Oh, I'm sorry. You're right.
It's okay. I don't need to talk. I'm about to talk on stage. I just wanted to briefly say that this piece was created originally as part of a residency in Poland at the Gdansk Festival, and I was mentored by a really fabulous Polish choreographer named Maciek Kuminski. Please look up his work. He's brilliant. When I originally started making this piece, I went to Maciek and I said, hey, I want to do this piece about maybe jellyfish and time and maybe space and a little bit about my dad. And he was like, okay, so you're saying you want to do a piece about your father. So this is sort of the resulting piece. What I did to make this piece was I looked at what is happening with my father. So I'm embodying my father. I'm also looking at my father, and then I'm thinking of a metaphorical explanation. What trace do we leave behind in somebody else's memory? Oh, and it's called Tentacles. brain cells. 86 billion of those brain cells are neurons. They get stuff done. 85 billion of those cells are glial cells. They support the neurons. Now, you may have heard this theory that our cells all regenerate in 7 years, but that's not exactly true. See, some cells don't regenerate as fast as others. In fact, some die in 3 days. Some may last 13 years. But those neurons, well, with them, we're in a constant state of decay.
person living with Lewy body disease. Yeah, I can't hear myself here. Start my life. I'll use my soccer voice. Whatever that means. What does that mean? So use your soccer.
No, actually, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In under 15 minutes, she was a person living with Lewy body disease. She was a neuron, both living and degenerating. She was a jellyfish, and then she was a caregiver. So we heard a lot from her about those experiences. Thank you. As soon as she comes out. And so she and I are going to chat for a bit, and then we'll open up to you all. Remember the question I asked you? What is it like to be? Yes, so Megan, spectacular. So at home, your father is Mike, but you call him, what do you call him?
I call him Dad.
Dad. So let me start. Well, what is it like to be dad?
I think that's a very difficult question, but my guess is that there are things that are really held on to, like really interesting little tidbits of memory or just ideas that just keep ticking away, a bit like stuck in a loop a little bit sometimes of thought, I think.
Yeah.
But I think he's thinking of things he's interested in.
Yeah.
So it's the things that he's engaged in. I think he's in a loop of those things, which is not to say that, although my perception might be, oh, that must be terrible. If you were stuck in a loop of things that fed your brain, maybe it's good for you, I don't know.
Yeah, especially so as a dancer, I think one of the things you did quite, as a physician saying beautifully about disease, is we have this odd language you talk about, like as the disease progresses. I one time had a caregiver say to me, what are you talking about? The disease, my wife is digressing. Anyway, but what the beauty of your depiction of him was how you captured what it must be like for him to experience both the cognitive and the motor problems. I mean, they were exaggerated, but what it must be like for him to experience my body's not following the way I'm thinking, and it should be going. And as a dancer, especially, what it must have been like for you to engage in that interpretation.
Yes, I'm just remembering some text that I left out of the piece as you were saying that. No, it's interesting. The thing that I was thinking, the text that I was thinking about is that my dad has this habit of reaching for a wine bottle at the dinner table, and we'll move the bottle of wine because we're like, Dad, you can't have any wine. It's done. The wine time is done, Dad. But he'll just keep reaching for it, and I find it so interesting, the idea that the body keeps going, even though it's been moved, it's gone, so that the body remains in motion. And that motion, as a dancer, is interesting to play with the speed or the surprise, so a lot of this idea of playing with surprise, the body being in a place that you didn't know it was one of the ideas I had for making the work.
Which, as a dancer, must be particularly awful, bear with me, the idea that your mind and your body, although I think body and mind actually are one, but that they're dissociated, and the suffering he must experience from that I want my hand to reach, but the command that I have for that is, and you elegantly depicted that, I think that for him is probably a big part of his suffering experience.
Yes.
Yeah, I know. Yes. So all of this is to say, when a person has Lewy body disease, they have it is a disease. I don't want to turn this into a lecture on it, but quite simply, and I'm glad when I heard it was about Lewy body disease, I was thrilled that it wasn't Alzheimer's, not because But Alzheimer's is the marquee disease, but there are many other diseases that cause dementia. And this disease, Lewy body disease, named after Dr. Lewy, who actually in his latter years was in Philadelphia practicing at Pennsylvania Hospital, though he did his work as Dr. Lewy in Germany. But being a German and being a Jew in 1930, the rest is history, sad history. Anyway, Dr. Lewy described a disease that caused dementia, namely the loss of cognition, that caused disabilities in daily life. That's what dementia is, disabling cognitive impairments. But in addition to the problems with memory, attention, concentration, and speech and organization, caused problems with movement, namely difficulties with fluid, smooth movements, looking a lot like someone with Parkinson's disease. And so oftentimes, a patient I see who I diagnose with Lewy body has been, or we say, misdiagnosed with Parkinson's often because they appear that way. And what impressed me from the get-go and I thought, how will a dancer do this? Because it is a disease that causes this cognitive and motoric problem. So that is what Lewy body disease is, and that's what you were performing there. Yeah. The story about him and your brother, his son, going through the Lincoln Tunnel. I wanted to get you take a moment to sort of. Why did you pick that story? You could have told not any number of, but I'm sure there are a couple of iconic stories. But talk about that.
It's interesting. When I was performing the piece in Poland, I did not choose that story. I think I told a different story. But for some reason, Dad had this really harebrained idea. A lot of leading up to the diagnosis was a different kind of mental decline. So a lot of what was happening is really outrageous ideas and impulses and loss of impulse control. And one of the outrageous ideas was this idea to drive an RV to New York for some reason. And he talked about it constantly. And so it was just, to me, kind of a marker of the beginning of the disease. And I read a little snippet of your book, and this idea that where people are misdiagnosed, or it takes such a long time to come to the diagnosis, whether it's Alzheimer's, Lewy body, FTD, or whatever the particular diagnosis is, that it takes so long. And I was trying to think of a story that represented that very beginning of losing some sense of insane thought, for lack of a better term.
I thought also very clever that the story was ultimately about running out of gas, which is in some sense what I think, in fact, many of my patients might not use those precise words, but that if you said to them, do you sometimes feel like you're running out of, they'll say, it's exactly right. I just seem to lose this energy in my mind or my thought, et cetera. So I thought it's a very clever story in that sense to capture the experience of what he must be feeling as he's struggling to get words out. The thought's there, but the words won't come out. And I have patients who will tell me that, and they struggle to tell me it, but if you take the time, that, I know what I want to say, I just can't get it, and even then they'll struggle. Unlike suffering in the body, it is a distinctly different kind of suffering. And then you were a neuron, but before we get to that, so it's what it's like to be Dad, but of course you have a role in this disease too. Namely, you're his daughter, you're one of his, and I'll use the term that we use, caregivers. What is it like to be his daughter?
It's interesting because my father lives in North Carolina, and I try to go to North Carolina to see my dad a lot, but oftentimes I see his decline in chunks, like stair steps. So, yeah, it's such a bizarre feeling to see somebody diminish in those sort of chunks of time. It's funny because there's moments when he's still there, and I can find these like little moments. My dad and I have a very humorous relationship, so if I can make him laugh, then I'm like, he's still there. But it's that, how the bar is much higher. I used to make him laugh all the time, and now I really have to pull out some zingers, I think, to get a reaction. So it's a bit different, and it's interesting because his personality was so humorous. My brother and I would refer to him as the Fonz because he always kind of walked into the room like, hey, and was just always happy. And to see him kind of in what I see as like a no man's land space where I don't know where he is. It's very odd. I will say, yeah.
It's very interesting that you described that. We did one of our projects looked at how people like you, excuse that phrase, but caregivers, that's the way we talk in science, we put people in categories and we count them. But people like you perceive the mind of their relative. And one of the key findings we found was even in individuals with, by our way we speak about the disease, very profound impairments in cognition and therefore function, that typically caregivers will describe these moments of lucidity, of clear connection, like that is mom, that's so typical dad, or oh God, that is my brother. And for them, what they talked about was how, first of all, number one, the things they would do to try and elicit those lucid moments, such as the jokes, or a host of things. By the way, many of the things people would do to try to create lucid moments was the arts. A very common theme was, you know, I know he always liked, and then they would go to some either musical or visual, and so that's why I do those things with him, which is actually one of the inspirations for our work on arts and the mind. But how much they also struggled as those efforts to perceive lucid moments became more and more difficult. Yeah, I know. So you were also a neuron, and you were also a jellyfish. And I do want to give people the opportunity, though, to ask questions about those experiences and that part of it. So there is I want to make sure everyone has an opportunity. Now, I don't know how we're going to do with microphone for people. I can hand it. Should we do that? Yeah. So we'd like to open up for you all to ask questions of Megan and myself, but mostly Megan, please. Okay, that'll be our theme. So our artist who performed what it is like to be a caregiver, a person with a disease, a neuron, and a jellyfish.
I'll take it around, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Hi. Extraordinary, powerful, marvelous, all those things, and just thank you for doing this. I feel like I want to talk offline. I'm a dance movement therapist. I've worked with individuals living with dementia and care partners for about 25 years. And I have so much to say and lots of goosebumps. I am curious, Megan, what you are doing for your own self-care and nurture, and throughout this process, specifically in embodying these processes and embodying your father and that relationship and all the emotions, all those things. I'm just curious what the process was like for you emotionally, and also, about that self-care, what specifically you found yourself needing to do or wish you did more of, or, does that make sense?
I don't know if this is on. It's not. I can speak loudly, and I think you can probably hear me. I'm sure any minute it'll come on. But what I would say is, in many ways, this is my self-care. That making the project is self-care in some ways. And, the work of making the piece is very vulnerable.
I want to emphasize, I think what you said is, honest. Well, of course it's honest, but I'm glad you said that, because I think one of the problems, and my friend Ann Basting and I, the author, creator of the concept of creative care, are big proponents of this. We often think the only people that can do the arts are artists, right? And the rest of us just have to watch. And if there's one among several messages from tonight I hope we take away, is that we're all creators. If you're human, you create. And the role of the arts to help make sense of uniquely existentially challenging events in our lives. Illness, there's no such thing as a good illness. If it was, that's weird, to use a popular word now. But I think dementia is a uniquely difficult illness because it affects identity, because of its effect on mind. And I think the role of the arts to help make sense of, cope with, make meaning out of it is so brilliant, yeah, and essential.
And yes, don't worry, I'm okay with breaking down. It's not weird. I'm happy to do it. It's good.
No,
I'm very much, yes, I'm a performer, so I embrace it. Yes, enjoy my tears. What I was trying to say is that I think processing it in a way through movement has been very helpful. But I don't normally make work like this. That's why I was saying, Maciek was really like, this is the piece. You have to do this piece. And I was like, but I'm trying to make this jellyfish piece. And he was like, no. So it was, in some ways, the process of making is cathartic,
yeah.
Of course,
Yeah. Others? Microphone. Right, Gene, right to your dyslexic, but it's gotten better, but anyways, I guess it's your right.
Megan, was the hydrozoan a wish or a meditation on the space between ourselves and the neurons that make us?
Ooh,
Or both?
I thought of the word tentacle to me, I was thinking about, how tentacles leave traces and how you can, a lot of times as a mover, you're trying to leave a trace in the air so that the audience can see and remember, but it's gone and it can't be seen. And so much of dance is a live experience that how do you imprint something that could be permanent, besides video and photo, obviously. So it was like an extension of how do I make something permanent? And so the tentacle was a little bit of that. But also I was interested in the idea of immortality. Like how do we live forever? And then when I was reading about the immortal jellyfish, it reverts back to its baby state. And so much of aging is reverting back to a baby state. So it's this beautiful metaphor that feels like so rich in so many different ways. And then, your brain and the connectivity feels tentacle-like it all feels somehow connected when you look at like an image of the brain or something, the neurons, and it just feels like tentacle feels like such a open word that it feels like there's so much movement inside of it and so much metaphor inside of it. So that's why the jellyfish and the immortal jellyfish is very interesting too. Like the idea that something could theoretically live forever, keep rebirthing itself. Like we have that creature.
Yeah, is there others? I, of course, when as I get to the microphone over, my immediate reaction when I thought of jellyfish was, oh, Megan, jellyfish don't have a mind. But I see, I know, but that's just me. I'll deal with it. But yes, no, I think this idea of interconnection I found very, very profound. And in fact, what many caregivers will tell me is one of their roles. The thing about caregiving, first of all, people have been caring for people since the Bible. The book of Ruth is about a caregiver relationship, even though people use it as some lines of it for weddings. It's actually a caregiver relationship. But no one called Ruth Naomi's caregiver. She was just a good daughter-in-law taking care of her mother-in-law. And people often think of caregivers as just that. They're sort of like neither maid nor nurse in this kind of liminal space. But what caregivers will tell me what they do is mind support. Is what their role is almost like eyeglasses or any number of things that allow a damaged mind to still function. And in that sense, this idea of the connection of the tentacles sort of reiterates that, how we all support each other's minds, the well and the not well. But for people with dementia, it's absolutely critical, which is why I think caregiving is so amorally profound, and B, all the more adds to the tragedy of how, in this country is sidelined and neglected because it is so important for mind support. Yes.
My question, Megan, I really enjoyed your David impression, David
David Attenborough.
Burrow, yes. And so it kind of got me wondering, like, what role does humor play in your experience of grief, if anything? You know, I consider you to be a very funny person and often use like humor in your work. So I'm just curious, like, and then you shared that, you know, you and your dad like vibe on that level. So I was just curious, like, where does humor show up either in your personal grief process or your artistic, you know?
So my sister, who is an awesome, amazing nurse who's actually looking after my dad right at this very moment, she got my dad this really beautiful television. She set it up, you know, she was like, okay, I'm gonna put the TV right by your bed so you can watch TV when you want to. And she set it up and he's watching her set it up and she's doing the whole thing. She like, you have to log on to all these things, buttons things you have to log into, all the HBO, the blah, 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 all those things you have to do. And she's doing it, she's doing such a good job. She's, okay, what do you think? And then she like wanders off. And my dad looks at me and I go, hey Dad, I got you this awesome TV for Christmas. What do you think? And he just cracked up, because I was just sitting there the whole time she's doing all the work. Yeah. And you know, I was like, what do you think about that awesome TV I got? And he was like, ah, ha, ha, ha. I was like, yep, I set it up all by myself. And he was just dying. I mean, so if I can like find these moments, really with him, that is for me my connection. Yeah. The thing that Jason was saying about trying to elicit what we remember in our you know, our loved one who is going through dementia of any sort, is trying to find the thing that you have. So for me it was this, like, you know, it's always these sort of jokes and this kind of really casual way of being together. So this is what I'm finding, but it's different for, I'm sure my sister and my brother and my mom, of course, it's very different. But for me, the humor, it lightens it. And, you know, I was talking about this with Jean and Molly and Jason. I'm not interested in making a piece where I'm just like, oh, see how painful this is. But, you know, how do we see light? How do we see some other side of, how can this be funny? How can how can reaching for a wine bottle and not getting it be funny? How can these moments that we see humor in them, and they're dark and they're scary, but they're funny too. You know, some of the really dark parts are really funny, you know. Yeah. And so it's like two sides of a coin, right? You know. I know you know. Yeah.
In Arthur Koestler's book, The Art of Creation, one of his central theses is that probably one of the most creative acts, it's probably one of the most human acts, is the creation of a joke. Because what it does is it takes two, other than the obscene jokes, it takes two seemingly truthful things and puts them together in a way that is absurd and causes this wonderful emotional reaction of hysterical, you know, of laughter. And when performed, and if done well, you know, creates connection. And I would argue you did a great joke there. You know, you put two truths together. Yes, it is Christmas, and this TV was made, but I made the TV, and he got the joke, which is a big act of mental perception to, quote, get a joke. You know, that is a great joke. You know, and then the connection of the laughter. So again, a good example of, you know, we're all creators to the extent that we all, you know, among other things, can tell jokes, some better than others. Other questions, comments?
Jason, I'll ask a question.
Yeah.
I think some of the people that came here tonight would like to maybe have you talk a little bit about the subject of your book. I did read his book, and it's really a remarkable book that will take you on a journey to learn the history, a lot of history about what
So the book is
a little bit on your thinking about Alzheimer's.
So the book is called the Problem of Alzheimer's, and then colon, and because it's nonfiction, you have to have a colon. Not that one, but that's it. See, that's a joke, and we connected. The Problem of Alzheimer's: How Science, Culture, and Politics Turned a Rare Disease into a Crisis, and then you have to have a call to action. And what we can do about it. By the way, the book was originally titled The Disease of the Century, which was an awesome title, but that was before March 16th, 2020. And my exactly. Yeah, so I had to change that title. Anyway, enough of that. Anyway, the central idea of the book, told through history and narrative, is the standard story for why dementia became a crisis, and that is the rhetoric that surrounds it, the late 20th century rhetoric. This is a crisis that will bankrupt America, that will destroy the American family. You can just pile on, you thought Katrina was bad, Hurricane Katrina, this, et cetera. And you can read that kind of crisis rhetoric. The standard argument is there's all these old people, all these old people, aging is a chief risk factor for getting dementia, and there's not enough young people to take care of them, so we've got this crisis. And all those are true facts, but actually that is not why it is a crisis. And that's the science, culture, politics issue. And I sort of write how, particularly in America, there's this series of both steps forward and steps to the side and backwards to both recognize that dementia is a disease caused by diseases that we should take on with research and better care, but then failures in culture and politics to address and take on that problem, hence it became a crisis. I will say, and I lay out in the book, there are very bright spots of progress. Two I'll highlight, and just recently, one of the rare bipartisan acts in Congress, which of course no one knows about because it was bipartisan, was the renewal of the Alzheimer's Project Act, which mandates a national plan to address the problem of dementia writ large. They always call it Alzheimer's because that's the brand. And that is not just a work on paper, it's every agency has to commit, given the agency's focus, what are you going to do about dementia in America? And then a mandate that the NIH can ask for as much money as it needs to take on Alzheimer's. It's called a bypass budget. Both cancer and AIDS have bypass budgets. They don't have to go through any earmarking. That was passed, renewed, just a week or two ago by Congress. Both parties got together as they have in the past. And that's great progress. Plus there's new diagnostics and therapeutics for some of the diseases. But I'll leave you with this. There's, about the book, there are so many things still that are contribute to why it's a crisis. And probably one of them, the biggest one, is the failure of America to create a system of long-term care services and supports, which is a mouthful and most people gloss over when they hear it. But that's called, and I just got a phone call or a Zoom call with a family yesterday who wanted to see me. We got a diagnosis, right, biomarker-based diagnosis. It was exquisite, but other than that, the physician just sort of shrugged. And they'd like, well, what do we do? How do we? And I'll give a colleague once said to me, it would be as if every now and then women, typically, had these things called babies, and they would get them, and then after a few years, well, what do I do with it? And like, how do I? And they, well, a school? What's a school? Like it would be as if we just let people figure out how to raise a child with absolutely no guidance, no education system or anything, and that's what we do unfortunately, to the American family. We just let them figure it out on their own, and it's awful. And that is probably I think that's actually the ground zero of the crisis. Yeah. So there it is. It's a happy book though. Yeah. Yeah, no, I'm very encouraged what has happened. And what is the solution? What is the solution? Well, short of a cure, we have to figure out how to live with these diseases. I would love to see a cure for all the diseases that cause dementia. I think like cancer and heart disease, it's unlikely that that will happen, but it's possible. And we do have treatments now for Alzheimer's. They slow the disease, they don't halt it, and they only work within a very narrow range of severity, but that's progress. So better treatments to slow it down, to delay the onset, that would be great. People still die of heart attacks, but boy, the survival rates are much better. People still die of cancer, but boy, the cure rates and survival rates are better. So we could get there with therapies, great. But then as long as there still is people like Dad, like Mike, we have to figure out a way to care, a system of care. And that's a host of issues around creating a better system to educate and train the family, provide supports to be able to live on a daily basis, events and activities like this to create meaning. The arts isn't just entertainment, it's a way to sort of help make sense of and live with these diseases. And a host of other things that are written in my book.
Family is the main way.
Family is one way.
I think that's what I just heard you say.
Yeah, I think a key is creating mind support for people with dementia. I think some of the best mind supporters are family members, but not necessarily. I think there's a whole role for people in the professional role to help create and provide mind support.
Sorry, I don't understand that word mind.
I know, it's a Karlawishism, yeah. So dementia, a disorder of the mind, that's what it is. That is what dementia means, out of mind. And what a good caregiver does is support the mind of that person by telling jokes, by providing them activities that that person enjoys, by reading their emotions and recreating the environment so that it doesn't cause stress and distress. And any good caregiver will tell you this isn't just doing tasks like a maid or butler. This is figuring out the right task at the right time, for the right amount of time, to help that person be as much them as they have been and I want them still to be. And that's mind support. And that's what a good caregiver does. It isn't just being a maid or butler, even though many of them say it's a lot of work.
Yeah. Question over here.
Yes.
I have not had the opportunity yet to read your books, but I'm certainly looking forward
Oh, thanks.
to that. But I would also like to ask from a medical perspective, there certainly seems to be a shortage across the country in neurologists. And as you well know, right here in Philadelphia, for individuals to be assessed for dementia, Alzheimer's, Penn is on the premier and one of the best institutions in this Delaware Valley providing the services, and yet there are not enough neurologists to be able to provide assessments initially when a family member may detect that there is something wrong.
Yeah.
And so if you could just talk about from a broad perspective nationally in terms of training or now why we have a deficit in neurologists in this country.
Well, we have a deficit in Alzheimer's specialists, or dementia specialists, so neurologists, psychiatrists, geriatricians trained to take care of, diagnose and take care of patients, as well as the other specialist fields as well. Someone here mentioned that you mentioned you work in dance therapy or art therapy, a paucity of people. So there's an enormous workforce gap. The RAND Corporation did a report on this and estimated that if current trends and whatnot continued, the chance of getting an adequate workforce in place was, I think it was like 2040 was the estimate we would have it. And until then, sadly, America suffers. I mean, the wait list for new patient appointments at the Memory Center is months. Note of encouragement, though, when I started there, it was myself and Dr. Clark and our staff at our Memory Center weekly meeting. Now it's myself and a host of colleagues, professionals, PhD, MD, RN, CRNP, various nursing fields coming together on a weekly basis, and we have 2 new fellows starting next year. But we need to see that done multiple times over multiple institutions to build that workforce. A lot of this is also a resource issue. We just have to, as a country, invest in building that workforce. And we could. There are some things that we could do, in incentivizing people to pursue those careers, as opposed to other careers. Doctors and others are economic actors, to use a easy phrase. But it's a very good point.
I'm sorry, I'm just going to add, though, it does take, you will know, the Penn Memory Center. Dr. Walk was a doctor who took care of my mother.
David is a good colleague of
Yes.
mine. Yeah.
Excellent colleague.
Yeah.
But I will say, it took a year to get my mother an appointment.
I know.
And it still does take a year. I have a neighbor who just was diagnosed 6 months ago and just recently was able to get in. So it is a tremendous problem here, like I said, across the country, but particularly I would say here in Philadelphia, in terms of being able to get an appointment just for the initial evaluation.
Trust me, the worst email I get is from people who write me and say just this, my mother, my father, et cetera, could you? And the sad thing is there are so many hours in the day, and just so many of us to do the work. But again, we have Dr. Rubino as our new fellow. We have 2 other new fellows coming in. But yeah, that is a tragedy. This gets back to the crisis story. I'm sorry to dominate here. We we had about 30 years to address this problem. People were saying, we don't have the workforce, we don't have the workforce. But again, this gets back to the politics of the disease, namely increasing that workforce meant spending money. And since about 1988 in America, raising taxes and taking other policy steps to increase spending has been the source of just bitter political fights and non-starters. And so that's where politics has made this a problem. I realize we are at time. It's 7 o'clock. But I want to give you the last word, not me. So we look forward to your performances coming up. We've heard the dates, Jean gave them. But please, the floor is yours.
My last word is that through making the piece, I have met so many people who have said, this impacts me so much. And then there have been 2 other artists' work recently. Good friend Sarah Sanford just did a piece about her mother's dementia. It was a theater piece that I saw recently called Love You, Love You, Love You. And there was another dance piece recently about a mother with dementia. And so I think artists are addressing this issue and people are interested in the topic. And so, I find that to be encouraging in its own way, that people are beginning to really address this in the arts and make it a subject matter. So it's very timely that this piece happened, and there were 2 other performances in the Fringe Festival about parents with dementia just recently. So,
I agree. Well, thank you so much. You're marvelous.
Thank you all. Thank you so much. This was such a rich discussion, and I really hope, did all of you think, as she said, there were other pieces, did you want to see them? Yeah, it made me think we should do a program on it, a full evening. So thank you, and I really hope that you will read Jason Karlawish's book, because it will explain a whole lot to you. It's just really an accomplishment, my goodness. And your solo, so beautiful, so beautiful. Good night, everybody. We have refreshments outside, and we'd love to talk to you. And Megan and Jason will be here to talk to you personally. All right, thank you.